Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Good evening, afternoon, or morning as the case may be. This is Peter Robbins, and the program is Meanwhile Here on Earth on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. We have a panel discussion for you tonight, and one that I've been looking forward to for some time. I reconnected with this extraordinary group of individuals over the Labor Day weekend for our friends not in America. That is the first weekend in September at the Exeter, New Hampshire UFO Festival and Conference, which was a great success. And we will go right into our conversation after some thoughts I want to share with you about an old friend of mine who passed 19 years ago today. Graham Birdsall was arguably certainly among the most influential UFO researchers, writers, investigators, publishers, and conference organizers ever, and certainly ever in the history of the United Kingdom. Graham and his brother, hold it one second, his brother Mark established UFO magazine, not to be confused with the American magazine of the same name, in 1981 as a little mimeograph publication. From that point on until 2003, when Graham died, and the publication really passed with him, it was far and away the best informed, best produced, most professional, popular UFO magazine ever in print in the English language. Remember, we're talking about a time before the internet when print journalism really mattered, and UFO magazines were a main source of regular information. Now it does seem arcane, thinking that you have to wait a month or 2 months, if it's a bi-monthly, to receive your next information on all the newest cases. Graham set the bar very high for himself, for researchers, for contributors to the magazine. He was not only not a guy who did not suffer fools easily, he did not suffer fools at all. He was a big bear of a guy, a truly bigger than life character who created a very successful UFO business, for lack of a better term. The publication was subscribed to all over the world, in official circles as well as regular folks. And his conference series, which lasted almost 20 years, called Quest International, usually coming out of Leeds, England, was one of the best produced, first-rate conferences in the UFO world ever. He died at 49 of a cerebral aneurysm, a cerebral hemorrhage. It came on very quick. Well, he died on the 19th, but he had the hemorrhage on September 11th. Again, this is 2003. I love the guy like a brother, and we had a lot of fun together over the years. Growing up in New York City and knowing that there was a mythical city in a kingdom across the ocean called York, I thought someday I'll visit that place. And my first guide of York was Graham. Last time I saw him, I remember well, because I was visiting him and his family, was December 24th, 2002, Christmas Eve day, I was taking a night train to get to Suffolk to see Christmas in with my best friends there. And on that day, it was a lovely day in New York. We took a long walk. This is the second to last picture I ever took of him, with his wife Christine on his left and one of his daughters, Helen, on his right, who was a huge help to him in his career in ufology and the publication of that remarkable magazine. UFO magazine was a bi-monthly, as I recall, and never missed. Again, superb production values, a beautifully printed magazine with the newest cases, and he would really go down to the hairpins on fact checking any content, because his name was attached to it, and he took it very seriously. Broke quite a number of important stories over the years, was a marvelous host, and I had thought I wanted to share a story with you about Graham, and at the same time, we have guests and a show to do, and I could go on probably for several hours just stories about this great guy. Had he lived, he died in September. The next month, October, he would have spent a month traveling around India, promoting the then brand new, about to go on screen miniseries Taken, the Steven Spielberg Sci-Fi Channel miniseries. I had introduced him to a man named Larry Landsman, who was the special project director for Sci-Fi Channel, and he was that taken with Graham that he decided that he would have the responsibility. Anyway, Yorkshire, Graham's home, also the home of Menwith Hill, the most secured listening post in the United Kingdom, an NSA operation, where even the highest ranking British diplomats and military people need permission from the Americans to enter the property. It is a shoot to kill zone. And I had asked him if we could get a look at it from a distance. And these are stock shots. I have pictures, but they are still digitized. They are still on slides. I haven't digitized them yet. But to give you an idea of what it's like to approach. And they're most famous for these big golf ball looking enclosures that their radar apparatus is cloaked in, so that you can't even see the direction that the radar is. I thought this is a particularly amazing photo with that rainbow. But in the distance, you begin to see these things. Anyway, we're driving closer and closer. I'm amazed, charmed, getting some great pictures. And at a certain point, when we would have been about the equivalent of here, I suggested that maybe we were getting too close. And he, don't worry, mate, it's okay. It'll be just fine. And we continued to get closer and closer, and finally ended up pulling in front of an official building. And two berets, young men in camouflage with fully automatic weapons at the ready. I think they were Heckler and Koch fully automatic rifles. I actually was staring at the barrels more because we had pulled up with my side facing the doorway, and they are walking toward us looking grimly serious, guns at the ready. And they finally bend down and look into the car, and they see Graham. And Graham, how are you doing? It's great to see you. We love the last issue of the magazine. What's coming up in the next issue? Had a lot of subscribers of these young guys, early 20s, stationed there. Very high security clearances, but they loved the magazine. It's the only funeral I ever traveled to England for, and it was very much worth it. He was a great guy, and somebody who really said, this is the contemporary weapon of choice that they're using on Menwith Hill right now. My recent research gave me. The other ones that I saw were much larger, but I'm sure shot as big a holes in people. Anyway, he really did set a very high bar for all of us, and loved life, was gregarious as hell, died at 49, but then most of the men in his family died young, as he told me. And he certainly could belt him back and chain smoke and eat heavy foods and stay up late with the rest of us. and packed in more in his 49 years than most people would in double that time. This is the last picture I took of Graham, way I love to remember him, and learn more about Graham Birdsall, a great man, a great guy, and a very important contributor to the world of serious UFO studies. That said, our show tonight. Our one guest who will be off camera for the show, but very much with us, is Mack Maloney. He is the host of Mack Maloney's Military X-Files radio show and podcast, and our other guests are also show participants. He's authored more than 40 books on a variety of subjects, including UFOs in Wartime, Beyond Area 51, and Mack Maloney's Haunted Universe. Commander Cobra is a former Air Force and Coast Guard pilot who flew special operations missions during the Iraq War and appeared in the blockbuster movie Bad Boys 2. Raven is co-producer of the show and reports on all spiritual and mystical matters. She has her own detective agency and had it from the age of 9 years old. She lives in a very haunted house in upstate New York, hopefully a fairly good distance from mine. Juan is the show's technical expert. He's a Navy veteran, having spent much time tracking Russian subs in the Caribbean. Willie Clubb is the show's security chief and government reporter. A veteran of the IRS, he screens all the show's fan mail and gifts, submerging them when necessary for 30 days or more in water. The Mack Maloney Military X-Files show is heard in 52 separate countries. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Hello.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You're most welcome, and it's great to have you here. I know you're all radio veterans. You did your own show for years. And I want you to use this show really in any way that you'd like. You all are friends. You all are colleagues. You bring different skill sets to the game. And I wanted to start out by asking Mack, how did the Military X-Files show start? And how did you pull this particular group of people together to produce the shows that you do?
Well, it started when a friend of mine, Mack Maloney, started the show. And then about a week later, we changed it to Mack Maloney. It came out of when we used to be on the radio, Peter, with that big show we had on KGRA.
Right, you and I and Chase Kletsky and Richard Dolan.
Yeah, and a few other people were on, but that was an interesting show. That was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And then I'd be on Race's show every once in a while, and then that kind of devolved into what we know as Mack Maloney's Military X-Files show now. We've been doing it in this version for about 5 or 6 years.
And Raven, did you serve in the military?
I did not, no.
So you are the one non-military participant, and you bring another kind of facet of the diamond to this show. How does, your work in kind of spirituality and paranormal dovetail with these, hardcore military types?
I think a lot of it ties into heavily with the UFO aspect, and a lot of people coming to that middle ground that those things might be connected. So that's kind of where my sweet spot is in seeing, like, this is also weird things that are happening, along with UFO sightings, possible entities that cryptids, things that we just can't explain. And I think that ties together in like a nice little way. So that's where I shine.
Commander Cobra, we are now in a time, the last few years, of highly decreased ridicule around the subject of UFOs, overt public interest among major political figures, media figures in the world of official science. One would think that, in a way, this is sort of a golden age of information coming out. What is your take on this whole period that we're passing through right now, and what do you think it's kind of masking, that we're not being told, that we're not seeing, that in classic governmentese, this is something of a kabuki show to take our attention off of perhaps other things?
You have a lot packed in there, Peter. So I'll say that chaos is probably the greatest purveyor of possibilities of having things break out. Because when you get into a chaotic period, which we are right now, there are many groups that are infighting on the control of information. Probably since the 90s, we've seen a very strict, disciplined approach to weaponize information, and I think that's what we're seeing. We have different factions that are trying to bring truth out and control truth, and then versions thereof of what's happening around it. So I am hopeful that we will have a major breakthrough. But as I spoke to you about a little bit when we were together in Exeter, I'm not one that needs proof to back up what I believe. And I think more and more people are growing in that chorus, that they have seen enough to know what they believe, what they feel, and they're content with that, and they obviously would love to see more information come out. But I think they understand that, as you said, there's a bit of theater going on here, and there's a bit of information control, and our pockets are being picked, literally and quite figuratively, while certain information is played up in front of us.
Juan, would you like to pick up where Commander Cobra left off on that?
Well, I think what Commander Cobra says is true, because I tell you, we believe this guy all the time. He's got major credentials, so what he says is true. What bugs me is that is the U.S. government sitting on information that we should really know about, and if so, why would they be sitting on it? Seems like every little piece, a little nugget that comes out, there's always a caveat saying, well, the rest of it is secret, or the rest of it is not to be disclosed, and off we go. So I'm thinking at some point in time, the U.S. government will be forthcoming, but I don't know when that time would be. At some point, maybe not even in my lifetime. And however, I think CC, if I'm not mistaken, believes that that time is really around the corner, or here now, and we're seeing it because of the money that's being put into the new organization. I forget the title of it, but it's incumbent upon the government and the security services to get their act together and give us the information that we've been requesting for quite some time.
Before I go to Willie Clubb, just a thought, devil's advocate idea to put out. I think one of the main reasons that the government, for lack of a more descriptive term, has not been forthcoming with information that it has and that it could have put out decades ago. Part of it is hubris. Part of it has to do with that culture of secrecy, an inherited culture. We don't elect these people. And that kind of cabal sharing of power that I can't even really imagine, of being one of a very small group in on a very large series of secrets, whether or not that might include crashes and recoveries, back engineering technology, or some of the more exotic aspects and more challenging aspects of the wider world of UFO studies, like UFO abduction. The government, the men in the government who are responsible for dissemination or lack of dissemination of information know that if this came out, they, as well as all the rest of us, would be revealed as really helpless in what we are up against and what the intentions of these other intelligences really are. Willie, your thoughts on that?
Well, Peter, first of all, I think the important thing here is that when we talk about the government, we're really talking about the military.
Yes.
In the military-industrial complex.
Yes.
I think it's been clear over the years that the politicians have very little control over what's going on with these situations. It's we can see that the military is primarily the leader here. They're making the decisions. You can see all of the contacts over the years have been primarily with the military, starting with, of course, Roswell and, Project Blue Book and Rendlesham Forest and Area 51. So it's always been, to me, the government is the military and not the political side of it.
Yeah.
I believe now that there's social media is a major driver of why there's a sort of a push to get more disclosure out to the public.
Yes.
Still very limited, but I believe that's where it's going. I think we saw that in last November, when the Congress announced there was a new organization that was established within the department.
Yes.
And that was called the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. That's a mouthful. And, we had the Intelligence Committee of the Senate involved in that.
Yes.
As you all know, they had a hearing. It was everywhere, even on C-SPAN. And so that gave me some confidence that we were going to start seeing something happening here as far as disclosure. Then in May of this year, the Congress House Intelligence Committee had hearings. Yeah, the first time that they've been open to the public in about 50 years.
Yeah.
And they had members of the security agencies there. They showed a video from an F-18 fighter. Wasn't a lot more, but it was sort of like trying to tell us that, they're trying to be more disclosure oriented. And now in July of this year, all of a sudden, that group that I just spoke about has been disbanded, you might say.
Yeah.
The new synchronization group. And the government, or the DOD, has now announced that it's, first of all, changed its name so that the new office is going to be the Anomaly Resolution Office, all domain Anomaly Resolution Office, with the acronym AARO. So they're making it a little easier for us. But the interesting thing there is that they are sort of changing the focus on that. They weren't too clear, but basically they've renamed the original group from last November. And so right now we're waiting to see what that's going to be all about. But they did say that it's expanded the scope.
Yeah.
We were very disappointed initially because that first group was announced with a lot of fanfare, but nothing ever came of it. So now with this meeting in this public forum that's happened during this year, something's going on. And particularly where all of a sudden the politicians are coming out of the closet here, you might say.
That's right.
And they're all spearheading. The first session was headed up, as I mentioned, by the Senate. This most recent one in May was headed up by the House Intelligence Committee. So something's going on here, and I think I'm fairly confident that we're going to find out more as the time goes on. I certainly don't believe they're going to have a big press conference and tell us everything that's going on, but clearly they know a lot. They know a lot more than they've ever told us. Why they've held back, who knows? Is it because they're afraid that we'll be in a panic and we'll give up religion and everything else if the truth comes out? But I'm more optimistic now than in the 50 years that I've been following this stuff. And in fact, I go back to the Art Bell days.
Wow.
So I grew up, my training initially was before Art, but I learned so much from him in his 30 years. And so anyways, that's where I stand on what's going on today.
Okay. Raven, when we talk about these other intelligences, I'm one of those people that's never really felt comfortable with the word aliens, although, usually culturally people defer to it. In my mind, which is fairly well informed, but, we are all relative authorities on a complete mystery. It's a bit of an oxymoron. But I have come to assume that we are dealing with a number of different intelligences coming and going from parts unknown for their own reasons, their own plans. And at this point, we see in internet chat and UFO circles and, at conferences, more and more discussion about, are they good? Are they bad? I think that's the wrong question, because they're doing what they're doing. It doesn't have to do with good or bad for them. But do you have any deeper sense of what we're dealing with here and how it fits into the bigger picture of, UFOs, so to say?
I kind of flip-flop on this a little bit,
Fair enough.
because sometimes I the way I think about it, or I maybe watch a documentary and I'm 100%, no, these are beings from other planets. But then I watch something else where I'm like, well, what if this is, people, not people, but these entities coming from another dimension that's, maybe paralleling ours or something.
Sure.
And it's like slipping through that veil almost. Not, like you said, good or bad is irrelevant. They're here doing something. We have no idea what it is. So that to me doesn't really matter. If I were to see something, I probably wouldn't just run right up and introduce myself. I would definitely stay cautious, but I flip-flop on that a lot, just because there's certain things that are compelling where I feel like that's it, that's the answer, and then I'll see something else, and I can never really make up my mind on it.
This will be a question that I'll ask Mac first, but then I'll ask any of you to comment on. Very quick backstory. I think you're probably all familiar with a former Air Force officer named Robert Salas. Robert Salas was involved in a nuclear missile weapons shutdown. 10 missiles that he was overseeing personally under the Minot, North Dakota Air Force Base. Unidentified aerial phenomena came in over the base, and Bob watched as one by one it deactivated the nuclear ordnance. He wrote a very powerful book about it, has had several press conferences that he has either organized himself or taken part of at the National Press Club. The most recent was last October, and I was there as he and several other retired military officers talked about variations on the same experience, and often the same base, late 60s, early 70s. And one, a Dr. Jacobs, who was the only one who was participating on camera. He was home in California, the rest of them right there at the National Press Club. He told us briefly that he had been involved as a cameraman in filming missile separations, and they had some wonderful new optics. Everything was going great. And he actually walked away for a bit, came back, and the film went to where it was supposed to go to. And his higher up shortly thereafter asked him to come to his office, asked him if he had been messing around with the footage, playing with it. Obviously not something that one would do in a top secret situation. And he said, no, of course. And they showed it to him. And the last stage, the dummy warhead, was moving through space, absolutely black behind it. And in came a disc-shaped object. It's going about, I forget, 12,000, probably faster miles per hour, and starts to circle this dummy warhead. And then at 4 points, equidistant, fires a quick beam of light. It's all on camera. We saw it reconstructed. And the object then destabilizes and falls to Earth. Any thoughts on this historic documentation, most of which is caught up in Robert, oh gosh, I'm blanking. Robert Hastings' fine book, UFOs and Nukes. Matt, you want to jump in? Mac, you want to jump in on this?
Well, there definitely was a time in the 60s and the 70s where over ICM bases, mostly in the middle of this country, they had security alerts that seemed to involve unidentified flying objects. The one that you just mentioned, I would love to see the film of that. I don't think a recreation would be enough to convince me. But this is true, though, that on a regular basis and out in minor Air Force bases, one of them, Maelstrom, is another one, Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, all the way up to Loring Air Force Base, way up in Maine. They had a series of, just these things coming in through the security net. They looked like UFOs to people. They did shut down. Sounds like one of them right now. They did shut down the power in some of them. They shut down some of the targeting in some of them. What they were, I don't think anyone knows. I don't think anyone knows to this day. But it did happen. And about a year before he died, in I forget when it was, early 90s maybe, Peter Jennings did a 3-hour series on UFOs. It was very mainstream,
I remember.
And he talked a lot about this and a lot of other really good UFO sightings, and he did not give any kind of a conclusion at the end. He just said, here are the facts.
Yep.
And this whole era of about 10 years of UFOs, like kind of busting in around our ICM bases, was he really got in depth to it. And the more he got in depth to it, the more mysterious it was.
I'll just add that although we will never see that footage, unfortunately, and I wouldn't believe or disbelieve it from the recreation footage, I very strongly believe the account of Mr. Jacobs, who gave it, and in a very impassioned way, at probably 80 years old with nothing to prove. But again, that's anecdotal. We all have different levels of evidence that kind of tip the scales for us. Commander Cobra, your thoughts on these kinds of incidents, or the one that Bob was actually involved in 1967?
Well, the particular incident, Peter, that you're referring to, I've seen and heard a lot of the investigation or the board kind of answers. And because of the time period that that refers to, there is a couple plausible ones that have been put out there. A series of main computer follow-ups and glitches that this occasion is a good example of using the situation of aerial phenomena to explain as a cover-up or as a deflection, so that you do not have the concerns that our nuclear response and this part of the triad was vulnerable to some kind of attack.
Yeah,
you can look at some of those explanations, and I think that they fall short. I think some of them are plausible. And no more or less than the aerial phenomena that is explained there. As Mack has diligently put out in a number of his books and a number of discussions that we've had over the years on his show and other shows that we've been together on, and there is a trend, there is a documentable trend, statistically measurable, of these kinds of events occurring over U.S. installations and what we can gain worldwide. The then Soviet Union spoke somewhat of these kinds of events. In general, there is a good indication that some of this happened in communist China, where you had nuclear events or nuclear capabilities, and it seems to be a prevention kind of thing that has gone on. And many people have extrapolated that extraterrestrial involvement has been there to prevent us from getting into a spot that we can't recover from by disabling. So I think that there is a wide range of evidence out there that these events did occur. I think that you're going to line up where you find your most attributable comfort with the then facts. What always comes up short, and I think it has changed greatly because you do not see the footage now that everyone is carrying a very capable device in their cell phones in many instances to provide these kinds of information, is a return to this. You haven't heard or seen much of this activity happening since then, since that really big flurry that occurred into the late I'd say mid to late 80s. And I think that is something that is of interest to me to find out what was the change. And that change is what we have now, a much better documentary process and a much more readily available. As Mack has indicated, I always question when we have things like film, pictures that cannot be seen, that we're forced to do recreation. Again, I go back to my earlier statement. I don't need proof for what I believe, but if I'm going to make an argument to try to convince other people, I really can't cite things that I can't produce. And that's always one of the things that I think gets us in trouble when we talk about this. I think it's enough to say that there was film. That film was never revealed, never shown to the public. And I think that's where we should go with that.
Excellent. Raven, your thoughts on this? Also, we understand from reliable sources that we had events like this that took place in the Soviet Union, but that activated the nuclear codes and started the machinery going. Not in any way that it couldn't be turned off, but it makes you think. But the best documented cases that I'm aware of are other intelligences, whomever and from wherever, shutting down this deadly machinery. Your thoughts?
A part of me always kind of wants to default to, this is like an observation type of a game they're playing almost, or maybe, just testing to see what we have and how they can manipulate it type of thing. It's easy to flip-flop on it because then I talk myself into other things.
I know the feeling. Jean, your feeling on the shutting down of nuclear weaponry by forces unknown that seem to be truly anomalous.
Is that for me, Peter?
Yep.
Okay. I don't really have a lot of information about that. I think the experts have spoken already on the show. It's been reported that that's happened, and I believe it, but I don't really have anything to say as far as how can we dispute it.
I really, I actually appreciate your answering that question the way that you did, more than you imagine. I know for myself, when I'm occasionally asked in just the same situation what I think about a certain case or situation or allegation, I will say, I don't know. And the response is, what do you mean you don't know? Often you're supposed to know this stuff. And I say, I don't have enough information to have an informed opinion. And I would rather hold off and have no opinion rather than an uninformed opinion. I will try to get to that subject, but thank you for your question. Willie Clubb, your thoughts on this particular subject?
Yeah, I have a different opinion on this.
Good.
First of all, I don't doubt that those incidents happened.
Whoa.
Whether it's extraterrestrial or some other source.
Oh, fair enough.
But this whole era that I don't buy is that whatever these entities are, whatever it is out there, that they're looking out for us. I haven't seen any evidence of that. The only evidence that we ever hear of is this business with the missiles. But, go down the line of things that are going on. They haven't stopped any wars. Look at all the killing that's going on. I think that whatever they're doing, if this is from an outside entities or whatever, it's for their benefit. And a prime reason I believe that is when you get to the abductions. Okay, the all of the different cases of abductions, you'll see that what they're doing is they're experimenting on the humans.
Let me just cut you off for one moment and then give you the floor right back.
Sure.
I used to think that, and I then thought the word experimenting, and this is an area I'm deeply involved in for more than 40 years. The word experimenting is a misnomer. There's a program going on that they are involved in propagating. Whatever that program is, I don't think they have to experiment anymore. It's going on, whatever it is, for whatever reasons. Your floor.
Okay, well, you can call it whatever you want. But, there's evidence there that that humans have been, they've used surgical devices on
Oh
them.
yes.
There's been,
Oh yes.
obviously, with the implants.
Yep.
It doesn't look like anything that we could see is done to benefit the Earth. And again, this thing about the missiles and what they're doing. Who knows who that is and what their purpose is? I probably feel more like Raven on that. That
Mm.
they might be testing things here, but I clearly feel that I don't see anything here that they've any evidence over all these years since we've really started experiencing them back on the date of my birth in 1947
Oh my.
that they're doing anything here to help us. And I'm still waiting for people to show me proof of that.
Mac, back to you with final thoughts on this particular question or this group of questions.
I agree with Clubb. I mean, there's nothing in any of the evidence, history, anecdotal, or anything that would indicate that if these entities are here, that they're doing this, for our good. I think people want to make the jump from these entities to angels, and maybe they are the same thing. How do we know? Okay, but as Clubb said, if they're looking out for us, they're doing a crummy job because, I mean, in these 50, 60 years since 1947, millions of people have been killed.
75.
75 years of, starvation, war, cruelty, slavery. They're not doing a good job if they're looking out for us.
Agreed. Devil's advocate, and it's an extreme point on a certain level, but do you think it's possible that their continued abductions and examinations following family bloodlines overwhelmingly, which still continues to amaze me, but we simply have too many well-documented cases to see otherwise, that their possible intentions are looking ahead at the history of the toxification of this very special little planet, which I think we can deduce means something to them as well as to us, maybe even more to them the way we're treating it. But that, is it just possible they're trying to create a being that's part them, part us, and better engineered to tolerate the continued toxification of planet Earth? Is that appeal to anybody, or is that sort of pie in the skies thinking?
Let me just say, could I just jump in real quick? Apple pie in the sky. Why would they, in my opinion, why would a civilization, or whatever you want to call them, that would be so advanced that they would be able to come here for 75 years or even more, actually all through, history itself? Why would they do this and take so long and go through in such a strange manner, abducting people, tearing up cows and stuff like that? They'd just do it. They'd just do it. I mean, maybe if there are cows being, found mutilated and stuff like that, and there are a lot of really good natural reasons for that. But if some of them aren't for natural reasons, why would they be picking up cows? I mean, come on. If these people, on one hand, if we're going to say that they're just lights out, technologically advanced, then on the other hand, we can't say that, they're doing experiments on cows, So I don't believe they're looking out for us. I don't think whatever these things are, it's all conjecture that they're any of these beings at all. I think they'd be much too big to be bothered with what little old us.
Once again, devil's advocate position as a possibility. Perhaps there is something in the world of mammals that is embodied in cows, where if they pick up, examine, do the cross sections, do the analysis of blood and tissue samples, whatever, of a cow at intervals, they can gauge and measure the level of a certain kind of toxification, either of food sources or whatever. And the cow is just the animal that they work with. We do know that in the best documented cases, there do seem to be literally very advanced surgical techniques going on. It's always struck me as interesting that in the truly authentic cases, no insect life and no predator animals will come to try to dismember or eat, the remains of this poor tortured animal. we have yet one more, genuine mystery here for sure. Is it fair to say then we have kind of two factions, and with the internet as this sort of hive mind governing humanity on a certain level, or at least documenting its shifts in thinking and beliefs, that we have two major trajectories emerging here. One, more what you are all talking about, that we need to be cautious. They have never done anything to establish their overt friendship. Granted, we haven't been burned to a cinder or reduced to, slaves all walking around like from an old Flash Gordon movie with little brain caps on our heads working in salt mines. But as you say, they don't seem to have done anything to assist humanity in its struggles to be human, which we are still struggling with. On the other side, you're all aware that there is a philosophical, experiential group of people that go back to the beginnings of the story as well. Welcome the Space Brothers, contactees, kind of a pre-hippie sort of love and peace mentality that hopes for the best and feels that, in almost a science fiction tradition, there is a confederation of friendly, other intelligences out there who are waiting for us to grow up enough to stop clubbing each other to death in sort of a Neolithic manner over where the line has been drawn in the dirt, because you're on my side of the line, before they move in to assist. Does that sound like fantasy land to you guys?
If I could jump in real quick, Peter.
Please.
2 points. One's the one that you just raised. That tends to agree with many military strategies, especially when you're trying to work and not disclose your support or your guiding hand in it. That's a very much a special warfare kind of technique that's used where you enlist help and you work with it. I'd also add that although I think that it's greatly suspect, there are some cases within the cattle mutilation and other animal mutilations that if you look at it from the standpoint, again, and I tend to view things from my military side of my life.
Sure.
That if you have such a major portion of the food source, literally, for this planet, that if you're trying to come up with ways to manipulate it in any direction, this is an important thing to go forward with. So there's something there. I did want to put in a somewhat comical note that when Mack was making his point, a giant clap of thunder broke over the compound up here in Maine, like it was a message from the Almighty that Mack was speaking in before it opened up. I just wanted to throw that.
You don't know who I know there, Cece.
I do know who you know. And that's the reason why I wanted to make note of it, because I want to stay in the good graces of everyone concerned.
I was going to say, I'd like to stay on the right side of that person too, whomever it is, no names to be revealed. Back engineering, the idea of, again, take your favorite Star Trek episode, leave a basic piece of hardware on a emerging planet, they back engineer it, their technology is based on our technology. My dear friend and colleague, Bud Hopkins, used to say, and Bud had a very Western mindset in such matters, that at our best, and I agree with him here, we human beings are pretty much capable of doing anything that we really set our minds to, at our best, working together. We've seen that in many positive outcomes and many negative outcomes. Negative in terms of, helping to win a war, but creating a nuclear age. And I'm perfectly satisfied on one level that the internet, fiber optics, black budget aircraft, we could have gotten to where we are now. And some of you are better versed on where we are now, as opposed to somebody like me who thinks they have a better idea of where they are now than we can even imagine. I don't think we needed to have a crashed UFO to put together the technology that we are now cutting edge with in the black budget world, but we may have. And I wanted to ask your thoughts on how you feel about that. And I'd like to start with Juan on that.
Well, there's been some documented evidence that bits and pieces of crashed alien aircraft, whatever they might be, flying saucer or whatever, was used to, I guess, advance the production of some modern technology that we use today. I haven't examined that evidence myself, but I believe it because it's come from multiple sources.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. Commander Cobra?
It's highly plausible that we have had or we enjoy technology transfer or understanding from something that we've acquired. We do that nation to nation. We've done it for many, many years. So that's not an unusual species kind of activity that we go with. We routinely are trying to work it. But I do have a pretty strong dividing line on this. I don't think we've ever really truly exhibited advanced aerospace or propulsion systems on a scale that is noticeable. If that activity is happening, it's happening on a very, very small scale, because I think we have a lot of difficulty either paying for it or controlling it or operating in it in a manner that allows the occupants, if there are occupants, or the systems to control it would exist. Yeah. What has become a parallel or another tracking line on this is what you were saying in the beginning, Peter, that we have an innate ability, and very rapidly, when you look from 1903 to where we are in 2022, in the flying world alone, where we've been.
Amazing.
I'm one of those people that believes we did go to the moon successfully a number of times.
Yes.
I've got a couple of people I believe that were on the face of the moon, and I know that can be somewhat controversial to this audience.
Yeah.
I remember back in my days here on KGRA having a couple really good debates with some folks that called in to explain to me that I was completely washed up on this subject. They would never listen to me again and talk to me the following week. My point is, we use some cover-up of this. This is a convenient way to explain it. It is, again, the ability to have you look a different direction. And I do think we've used it successfully. And I think I mentioned this to you at Exeter, that many times in my very modest aircraft with some very, very advanced tech that we were carrying inside it, I would prevail myself of what was available online for people that were observing the sky, which happens at great numbers here in the United States and worldwide, just to see if our activities were being noted and people were reporting strange activity that was going on. And it was nothing extraterrestrial, I assure most people, but it was an interesting way to track how we were being seen, how we were being observed while we were on these exercises and things that are going on. I think the greatest application is the rapid advancement of electronic technology, how we have gone from tubes to where we are with the integrated circuit to now things like bubble memory and almost a biological basis for how we're doing computing power and information storage and manipulation. That to me points, there's a very strong possibility of gaining and reverse engineering from a source to accelerate this to the point that we have.
Again, like Raven, I'm pulled in two directions on this subject. Both of them make sense. And if somehow we were to find out at some point in the future that, in fact, our cutting edge technology in a number of aspects was based in certain discoveries made with bits and pieces or technology found in Roswell or another authentic crash, I wouldn't lose a moment's sleep about it. We're coming into the end of our first hour, and when we come back, it will certainly be with some more talk about the moon, the surface of the moon, America's coming and going, and a number of other subjects that I am really curious to go into with this group. Mac, any thoughts before we head off to our break? The aliens got him. I knew it was just a matter of time. Either that or the NSA. Willie, you're saying?
Yeah, I just like to end on that note, going back to Area 51.
Yes.
You know, the talk about the craft or whatever that they had there. And I think the only example, I think it would be far too advanced for us to be able to go in there and do a lot of work on it. But I do believe that possibly that stealth technology and the design of those bombers, that maybe they got some of that out of these pieces of craft or whatever that we've picked up over time and worked on at Area 51.
Yeah.
And lastly, as far as the issue of technology and all these things that we're developing, NASA deserves a lot of credit.
Yes.
Okay, we talk about all these things, and but you look at a list of things going down from insulin pumps, water filters, scratch-resistant lunges, memory foam, anti-corrosion coating.
And I am going to have to cut you off absolutely mid-sentence because we're about to go to break. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth with my guest, Mack, Raven, Juan, Commander Cobra, and Willie Clubb. We will be right back.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
And we're back with Meanwhile Here on Earth, your host Peter Robbins, and our guest tonight, Raven, Juan, Commander Cobra, Willie Clubb, and the inimitable Mack Maloney. I thought we should really start our second hour with something that I hope will be a point of contention, because I know you all don't agree on the same thing. Mack, are you there?
Yes, I am, Peter.
Good.
Can I ask you a question? Uh-oh.
What's
my last name? What's my last name?
Maloney.
Okay, what's the question? Go ahead, please.
Thank you.
Next time you have to ask him how to spell that, and then we'll work from there.
With a H. My question goes back to the wonderful show that you and I and some nobody named Richard Dolan and Chase Kletsky did on this network years ago. And I remember one day a subject came up and it resulted in a really lively argument. And I thought, well, why start off this section in love and peace when we can argue about something? And it has to do with something that I didn't have an opinion on until I did. And that's so-called, and these two words I know are a scourge to you, chemtrails. Now, I'm not necessarily terribly knowledgeable about aviation, but I do understand vapor trails, that water vapor is left, as exhaust in our high-powered aircraft, and we see it, as sort of a white line, like a line of cloud, and it disappears in a very lively fashion. Most vapor trails that I look at, because I live about 10 miles from a regional airport here, so see small and larger planes coming and going regularly, they last about 10 seconds, maybe a minute. However, I've observed trails in the sky that last for hours, and you see crisscrossing. It hangs over this area of New York State. Sometimes it's farm country. Some people say that is some kind of horrific stuff that's being sprayed on us to socially condition us or poison us or brainwash us or God knows what. But you feel that simply does not exist. Are there members of this cadre that feel that vapor trails are a reality? I mean, chemtrails.
I do. Like as a kid, I remember thinking 100%, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. And then as I got older, you become a little more cynical, but then you start to, kind of open your eyes a little bit and you see all of these, I watch a lot of shows about that stuff. And I'm like, what do any of these people have to gain about making any of this up? And as you mentioned in New York, I mean, where we are is a very particular spot in upstate New York. So some of them can last 10 seconds. Other times I walk out of my house and I'll see one hanging there for 2 or 3 hours.
Continue on.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I had one experience. And again, turning this over to Mac, I don't mean to be facetious. I just don't know. Where at sunset, one night several years ago, I saw small planes going along and leaving these lines. And there were the vestiges of some left in the sky the next morning. And that would have been at least 8 hours. Mac, is it just variations on vapor trails that are dependent on weather and atmospheric conditions, or are we dealing with different phenomena here as far as you're concerned?
No, it's Cobra will be able to tell you the scientific reasons why people see vapor trails. I know it has to do with like the temperature, how high up they are, and things like that. But when it comes to like chemtrails, and the idea is that we have these dozens, if not hundreds, of airplanes crisscrossing the country every day, dropping chemicals, doing who knows what to us, and they're making us stupider. Then I don't believe it. Here's my question. Okay, for you to do this in the process that people say it's being done, these conspiracy people, okay, you would need a huge fleet of airplanes that kind of dispense chemicals, just like you might see a firefighting plane doing, but much higher. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have, first of all, you would have to have this fleet of airplanes, which you would have to hide somewhere. You would have to have the logistics of putting these chemicals on these planes and having them take off and land secretly, because you don't want anyone knowing about this, and no one's ever uncovered it. Plus, you would have to have every air traffic controller in this country, civilian and military, in on it, because they would see these hundreds of airplanes flying around there dispensing this stuff. And the other thing, too, is you have human beings running this and human beings flying these airplanes. How do they know that they're not dropping chemicals on their loved ones, relatives, friends, whatever, It's nothing. There's nothing to it. Sorry, Raven, but there's nothing to it because there'd be the evidence, the fingerprints, the footprints that these people would leave would be enormous.
Extreme conspiracy theorists much hate you.
Good.
Mac's right. I'm more concerned about acid rain than I would be of chemtrails.
So, guys, any of you, Juan or Commander Cobra or Willie, do you think that there is something to this phenomena, or that it's misinterpretation and pumped up by the conspiracy community?
If I can jump in real quick, Peter.
You may.
I'll give that quick science piece. What Mac was explaining, depending on the altitude, depending on the ambient temperature, the height that you are physically above the ground, and the type of engines that you have on the aircraft, you're going to see different characteristics that are going to come out of the exhaust. When you burn carbon-based fuels, water is one of the byproducts. Water turned into ice crystals and they go. You made a remark that you saw one, and then when you got up the next day, the same chemtrail or correction vapor trail.
Only saw it once, but it stuck in my mind.
Okay. A very reasonable explanation is that you probably saw the same track or nearly the same track in the sky that air traffic control assigns. When you see things where we live up in the northeast part of the country, you're flying a rum line, a course line that takes you to or from Europe. Generally, when you see that, that is the most advantageous on the sphere that we live on to get there. There is a very interesting and not well studied, not well researched aspect of this that since the 1940s, because this started to occur when we started to fly basically above 30,000 feet, is when you really start to see it come into prevalence. That we have changed the atmospheric capability somewhat of the globe because we've introduced water vapor and suspended it as ice crystals that mix with other moisture phenomena going on. We're creating a cloud base that's no different than the other parts on. And it has been some very good scientific papers, but it's not really an area of interest because it ultimately, when you look at the amount of water vapor that we have put into the atmosphere, no one can really come up with good conclusion. Now, on the conspiracy side, obviously, there are folks that believe. I will give one counter to Mac. I completely agree with Mac on this one. I just don't see it happening. But there is one interesting aspect of this. If you're trying to depopulate the planet to get it down to some reasonable number, as many people purport is the way that we need to be heading, and you were to add something into fuel, if you were to put something into the fuel, you wouldn't need a mass group of people to be doing this. You would just be going about your business and committing suicide on a global basis. The Romans used to use lead pipe and drove themselves mad. Long before they realized that they were doing it, but they wanted the convenience of water running into their homes.
And lead in their glass as well.
Correct. So there are some instances where people will do that. So if there is some master conspiracy going on here to depopulate the Earth, this may be a way to do it.
Yeah, but the U.S. population keeps increasing and increasing. So once again, they're doing a bad job.
Yeah, that's the truth. I want to shift gears here. We were discussing the moon briefly. There is kind of reaction conspiracists who feel that we, the Americans, nor anybody else ever went to the moon, that the entire program was faked, beginning at the very start, and that it's all been PR. I find that actually very insulting myself, I guess partly because I am a kid that grew up with the original Mercury program, wasn't into sports, but those guys were heroic to me, the 7 initial astronauts, and their courage in moving us forward. Allegations of a secret space program exist, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But as far as the moon goes, not only do I feel that we have gone there, and lucky enough to number among my friends Edgar Mitchell, who was the 6th man to walk on the moon, and woe to anybody I can imagine who would have told him when he was alive that he's a liar and he never went to the moon. But the alleged photos that have been with us for decades now of things on the moon that shouldn't be there, the seeming remains of civilized structures themselves, things that seem to mimic what a mining operation on a large scale might be from an aerial satellite photograph on Earth, a very large tower, anomalies. These are things I think you're familiar with. And right off the bat, do you feel these are all misunderstandings, or that there have been intelligences on the moon working it, or we have done it, or we are doing it, or somebody's been doing it? And I'm going to begin here with Juan. Your thoughts on this question?
Oh man.
Your opinion.
Jeez.
I know you've never been there. Well, I assume you've never been there.
It's
Well,
just like Spoo on one.
I grew
I
I grew up with
up, and he's gonna eat.
I grew up with you. I grew up in your era, and I remember reading all the theories that it's green screen technology, and this never happened. And but again, it's what you read, what you see. As far as I'm concerned, what you read, what you see, and what you hear about. I haven't been a scientist to examine the data myself, but I'm pretty well convinced that we did land on the moon, but and are walking around on it, and we got the rover out there doing things and picking up pieces and stuff like that, which is amazing. I believe all of that is happening as we speak.
Yeah.
I don't want to deny the folks who claim that this isn't so, because they have the right to their opinion, and then they have their databases to maybe help form that opinion. But for me, I think that it's all real. It's all happening. The moon exists, and it's pretty visible from the new visual aids we have up there.
Yeah.
So now we can
continue.
see it.
Yeah.
Now we can see what's going on.
Yeah. Before we go on, just you brought up again a very good point, which is what our information is based in, threshold of belief, what passes for evidence for us. First of all, any photograph can be manipulated brilliantly well. We all know that, and that's been the case for many years. I came into the subject of UFOs almost against my will, and very quickly, and became obsessed with it at the start. And this would have been still in the later 1970s. And at the time, NASA offered a print catalog. It was newsprint, I remember. And what it was thousands of little numbers and descriptions of what satellite took what photograph of what part of the moon. Some of them had tiny little, Xerox copies next to them. And again, this is a program that has ended, I believe, before 1980. But for $1, NASA would send you an 8x10 chemical glossy of a Hasselblad blow-up, as high resolution as they could get it. And they offered thousands of them. And myself and two of my early colleagues, Pete Mazzola, a very tough, no-nonsense New York City police detective, also a great UFO investigator, and Antonio Huneeus, a brilliant journalist who I kind of got into the work with. We kicked together and we ordered, I don't know, maybe 24 photos. And then we spent time sharing them. My dad was a jeweler, and from the time I was a kid, one of my toys was always a 10-power loop, which I always keep one handy. And we all started going over these photos in detail. Again, this is a few dozen photos out of thousands, out of hundreds of thousands, maybe, of ones that were ultimately offered. And one thing we figured out pretty quickly was that NASA did not have the manpower to vet each individual photo they decided to offer before offering it, because on several occasions we each came across, going millimeter by millimeter, things that just didn't look right. And almost anything can happen in nature. We see faces in clouds and all that kind of thing, but it happened enough that we became convinced that these claims of anomalous activity on the surface of the moon were real. And within a year, that program closed down and was never seen again. And damned if I remember what happened to those glossies. We're talking over 40 years ago. But again, with that in mind, and that's just purely my experience, Willie Clubb, your thoughts on what is going on the moon, what has been going on the moon, anything around that subject?
Well, first of all, I agree with Juan that I believe that we certainly did go to the moon. In my opinion, if there really was, green screens and all that, all of the thousands of people associated with NASA and all that would have known that. A lot of them would have. And don't you think by now someone would have said, I'm going to go for the money, and they write a book?
Yeah.
And the expose. So I'm a firm believer that that all that they say happened, did all the visits and so on. So first of all, I agree with that. Now,
yes, keep going.
Well, as far as the purpose of the moon and so on, yeah, I know there's all kinds of pictures out there. I forget his name. He was a scientist at NASA years ago. He used to be on Art Bell show all the time. And he was a big advocate of that NASA was hiding, a lot of these photos and so on. But I got to tell you, I look at the way things, I go by people's actions. And where are we going now? We're going to Mars. The moon is only going to be a stop off for us. If the moon really had all of these buildings and all the other stuff up there, don't you think we would have gone a lot earlier than 30 years? I mean, we stopped going there. Whether it's budget or whatever, we lost interest. So to me, there's no, show me the proof. So to me, where the future is Mars, in that if there was really things up in the moon, we would have been there long ago. And again, like I say, everything I read and see, we're just using the moon as a stopover.
If I can just jump in. Yeah, I agree with everybody. And once again, I don't want to be the guy at the party that someone goes and asks, go buy a 6-pack for us. But there's a thing called...
Why not?
Well, I know. You got
after
any money?
The show.
Yeah. There's a thing. There's a Japanese satellite that translates into Luna, Lunar -A, and it's been in low moon orbit for about 3 or 4 years now. And there's actually a website that you can go on. This satellite has photographed every inch of the moon over and over and over again, and lets people see the live feed. Okay. And there's no buildings up there. There's nothing. There's no towers. There's none of that stuff. I can see back then when you're doing your photo analysis back then, they would maybe see some kind of intriguing images that might or might not be. But now, really, every inch of the moon has been photographed many times over. And I agree with Clubb. If it had any of this kind of stuff, then not only would it be a huge, huge announcement in the history of, mankind, womankind, but it wouldn't be a stopover. I mean, it's literally going to be like a gas station to go to Mars, and they would give it a lot more deference and preference if it was this great thing that people want to believe it is, but it isn't. It's desolate. Magnificent desolation is how they put it.
Raven, your thoughts?
This is I love a conspiracy theory. I'll dive down a rabbit hole over anything. The moon landing is one for me that's without a doubt they landed on the moon. You can't convince me otherwise. And like you had mentioned, it is insulting for people to say like, no, you didn't go there. On a larger scale, I feel like whether it be extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings, I feel like the moon is probably old news to them. So it's more so we'll let the Earthlings have it. We're gonna go off to this galaxy and party over here. But it always blew my mind that there were actually people that believed that all of that was faked. I mean, for what purpose? Yeah. And I think Clubb had mentioned it. Somebody at this point would have stepped forward to make a quick buck. Somebody would have written a book at some point. Your contract ends. What do you have to lose at that point? And at the same time, I do also agree with Juan where you have the right to your opinion, whatever, that's fine. Sure. But I 100% like you can't convince me that we didn't go there.
I'll share with you all a quick anecdote. that I don't know if it's true or not, but it would go some way in explaining why this considerable cadre of people have built this entire belief system on a faked, lunar program. And it was something that is one of my final conversations with the late Graham Birdsall I was speaking about. It had to do with the fact that the president, when the first landing on the moon took place, was Richard Nixon, who, not to denigrate him as a person, he was a paranoid. He was very paranoid about certain issues. And one of them, we now know, as the program continued to develop and we became closer and closer to the launch, he was more and more consumed with a concern, not that the mission would not be successful, but that somehow the film footage would fog or not come out. We had Hasselblad state-of-the-art technology, but it was still unsure whether or not the shielding to keep the film from being exposed by gamma rays or whatever would hold. And that in his paranoia, he commissioned a top secret project employing a very famous director who could be sworn to secrecy, giving him a huge budget, a film studio in the middle of nowhere in the Southwest to recreate the surface of the moon with all the borrowed hardware, everything just so, big sound stage, but that a number of still photographs that were taken on that location betrayed certain lighting problems or a problem with some allegation that would not have been the case. Small things. One of that comes to mind for me is a beautiful still that I saw that Graham had of the landing surface, but it was cropped in such a way you could see a floodlight at the ceiling, and that's what it was. And that some of this material got out into the world. It didn't jive with the conditions on the moon, and that became the basis for a possible understanding of why people believe to the contrary, when many of us understand with little question that indeed we human beings and we Americans were responsible for this achievement. Moving from here, there's something that is called, generally speaking, the secret space program. And it has become a darling of extreme thinking, although I have no doubts that there has been what I'll call, for lack of a better term, a secret space program, that everything that has gone up has not been reported to us. Certainly military hardware, missions that have been done in a classified manner, no problem with it. But some of you may be familiar with claims of a secret space force that fights out in the universe bad aliens and then debriefs people at the location, the way station on Mars. Then, because they're assigned for years on end fighting the dog people of Tralfamadore or whatever, that they then have to go back in time to be reinserted in their bodies, and other things that I find pure bullshit, but that there is a faction of people within the world of UFO studies believe. Your thoughts on a secret space program and where the reality lies and where the unreality lies, and begin with you, Commander Cobra.
Sure. Don't ask me about the moon landing. And I had all the great stuff, and I wanted to share my Gene Cernan story, but that'll be for another show at another time, I guess.
Okay.
So now I get to handle this grenade. Let me put it as gently as I can, Peter. There is no doubt in my mind that we have a secret space program, but it's going to disappoint a large part of the KGRA audience that it's not what I consider what they hope it is, with interesting stories of body transfiguration.
Thank you.
Working with it. I don't see anything there to back any of this up. But I do think that we have been involved in a global nation struggle in our very near space, fighting a very pitched battle, thankfully to this point, greatly bloodless as far as I can see what has gone on, but we are engaged in trying to fight the orbital space around us very, very clearly for information and reconnaissance control, and probably even to the point now with our dependency on satellites for navigation, satellites for communication.
Yeah.
But you're talking about our earthly enemies, nothing.
Correct.
Yes,
I completely agree, Mac.
Sure.
You know that you and I agree on this, unless you've had a major change in heart that I don't understand, or and I don't mean to be the least bit insulting to those people that believe this, know this. I respectfully listen, but they lack any tangible proof, and it's just not part of anything I can believe.
Juan, your thoughts on this question?
Secret space program? I don't know. It's who's funding it? How secret can it be? I mean, if it's a space program, okay. Was Elon Musk hired to do this, or what? And what's so secret about it? Are we going into planets unknown? Are we following some new revelations from the James Webb telescope? Say, hey, we got to go there, but we don't want to tell anybody that we're going to go there, and we're going to just secretly fund it from, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not buying it. Anything's possible. I tend to go with if CC thinks it's real and Mac thinks it's real, I'll pay more attention to it. But you know what? I haven't seen it on the BBC since I've been here, so I don't think it's real yet.
Willie, your thoughts?
This high praise, huh?
Yeah, I believe that there's a Black Ops budget for this whole space group. Now that they've formed an official space team out there now, but I don't believe that we're fighting with anyone. I think that, in my opinion, it's more to protect us against some of our enemies on Earth. In that, as we know, there's been a contest out there, who can get the most weapons out in space to go after the satellites and everything else. So I think there is a Black Ops, but I personally think that it's more toward protecting all our infrastructure out there.
Yes.
And also maybe coming up with some other kind of offensive capabilities, but not geared toward what's way out there, but what's here on Earth. And, again, that's only my opinion and things I've read, but
I will leave off this area of discussion by saying about 15 years ago, I spoke at a conference in England, and one of the featured speakers, a fairly well-known person in the field at the time, was presenting a paper. First, the quick backstory on advanced Nazi technology around UFO phenomena. Based on that, they're getting off planet. Based on that, they're making their way to a large asteroid in one of the rings of Saturn, where they had set up a base. And the presentation had blown up photographs of a ring of Saturn with some little thing there that our protagonist described as the home of the Nazis in space, and another smaller little detail that was one of their starships. And I thought, I need to get out of here and have a cigarette. And again, there are people that take such allegations very seriously. And it brings me to another question, and one that you are all in a position to, I think, give some reasonable reflection on, which has to do with under President Trump, a new military agency was established called the Space Force, which the first time I saw their camouflage uniforms that would not have hidden you in space, I had my concerns about it. It's called a Space Force. NASA was chartered, as we remember, for peaceful endeavors in space and for study, and that it was to belong to all of humankind. Well, that didn't last too long, apparently. And the weaponizing of space is a reality increasingly so. We don't seem to be able to beat this basic feeling of we need a defensive stance, and we have bigger sticks now, and we have to deploy them because the Chinese or the Russians or who knows, the Indians or who's next in the great space pantheon may want to take an advantage or disable us. Do you feel that behind the government's increasing openness, and again, the government meaning the military industrial complex overall, is again more of a kabuki play to mask the fact that we are seriously getting ourselves into military preparedness off Earth? And if so, do you think it's all to address our alleged potential enemies on Earth, or there may be an aspect of this arming sensibility to do with them as well as us? Commander Cobra, you're first.
Peter, you have again packed quite a bit in there, so let me try to run down as much as it as quickly as possible.
Did you write that down?
From a military standpoint, a separate space force makes a lot of sense. We just celebrated the 75th anniversary of the United States Air Force being a separate service. Unfortunately, these are requirements that come out of the muddled mess that government becomes. I think you remember I said this at Exeter, quoting, or at least semi-quoting Bismarck, the more that goes into government and sausage, the less I like both. The recipe is constantly being messed with, and we're really stuffing a lot into that casing, and we're not getting the kind of results that we need out of it. So it all comes down to budget. It all comes down to the ability to project and get a mission completed. Space operations, like naval operations or land operations, are definitely specialized. It's not so much the ability of how you do it, it's the ability to have the logistics behind it to and produce the people and the equipment that you need to project that power. Yes, you rightfully say that the Space Force has some very interesting fashion sense in their uniforms because they have to have a distinctive look. I think they basically went to one of the earlier sci-fi shows of the 80s there. I cannot remember the name of it. And they copied those uniforms. They didn't even have the good measure to go with Star Trek. I would have voted for the Star Trek part of it. And the other part I would have probably gone for is the Star Trek command kind of setup. One of the things I don't like about Space Force is they followed the Air Force, which is a land-based force, kind of command structure, and I don't think it quite fits what you need for what they plan to do with it. But that said, the missions that are out there and the missions that they're being confronted with is to try to control in the realm of space operations, extra atmospheric operations, the ability to thwart an enemy's capability, know what an enemy is going to do, as well as provide and prevail in the case of some kind of space-based warfare. Now that sounds really exciting. You know, when people think of, well, we're going to have something that's in the realm of science fiction, that's probably coming. Right now, the ability to neutralize or control the ability for another nation to use their satellites is what is probably the most important, and our ability to rapidly be able to replace lost satellites so that we can maintain the kind of navigational and communication prowess that we keep. Unfortunately, in my estimate, we have gone very strong to use satellite-based technology as our means to confirm and observe what other nations are doing. We've given up on human intelligence. We've given up on manned aircraft, even unmanned aircraft to a great extent, flying in the atmosphere, putting those chemtrails out, or vapor trails, as we were talking earlier. I'd like to tie the whole show in together for you, Peter. And we have gone to a space-based capability, and that makes us vulnerable in other areas. We have to have more of it to produce what we maybe have got out of a quote-unquote spy network of people operating on the ground or aircraft in very dangerous positions doing those missions. So that is really where I think you're going to find and the need for this, and why we're going forward with it, and why the Space Force was created.
Yeah. Juan, your thoughts on this question?
This would be crazy to think that we don't have a space force, whether secret or non-secret, working surreptitiously behind the scenes so that nobody else knows what the heck we're doing. Okay, so and there's a mission there, and the mission, as Commander Cobra suggested, is to beat the other guy in occupying certain realms of space, certain strategic locations, equipment, satellites, or protecting our satellites. What I guess the secret part of it is that we don't want anybody to know the extent of it, or how advanced we've become.
Yeah.
The uniforms notwithstanding, I was thinking more of Spaceballs than Star Trek. But here we go again. I don't know if we can keep that a secret. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a big chain of events that have to take place to make this thing successful. And there's a lot of talent who, when employed, would be boastful about it in their dying days. So one of these days, the big reveal is going to take place. One reveal might be, yeah, we didn't land on the moon. I was the program director of the make-believe moon landing, and we did it at someplace in the UK or someplace in Scotland that looks like the moon. Okay.
Raven.
Or yeah, the chemtrails are real. We just didn't have enough tanks to deploy enough chemtrails to poison people. So, but I'm making my confession. All these confessions are going to take place. Now, the Space Force, we give credit to President Trump on putting a name to it and making it sound scary, exciting, funny, unreal. I don't know, but because it's associated right off the bat with movies, to me it doesn't sound like it's pretty real. But hey, this is we have the capability of doing anything in secret, or at least in stealth mode.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that there's enough talent out there to be ahead of the game. I don't know why we have to call it secret. Maybe why don't we call it an alternative program that's funded by Jeff Bezos and those guys, and maybe we can get it make it happen better than the current Space Force. Who knows?
Raven, your thoughts?
I definitely think that a Space Force exists. I feel like it is maybe jumping the gun because there are so many issues that we're dealing with currently, where maybe we should focus our energies there. But again, I mean, we really don't know 100% the extent of what they're doing, how much money is being dumped into this. I do think it's a good idea. I definitely don't disagree with that. I just think that there's a lot of other issues at hand that maybe could use our attention. I get hung up on using like weaponizing, the moon. I get really hung up on that because to me it's not something that we should just trample all over. It is, it's definitely, it's more sacred than that. And I know a lot of people are probably going to roll their eyes at that comment, but it affects people. And I feel like, making it a symbol of violence is not going to come back to human beings well, if that makes sense.
I'm going to begin this next question with Mack and then on to Juan. The event that seems to have been a trigger for this part 2 chapter of our modern age of UFOs that started in 1947 and then mutated in late 2017 with the publication of a pair of articles in the venerable New York Times, written by 3 outstanding journalists, Ralph Blumenthal, Leslie Kane, and Helene Cooper, that discuss a program that was being looked at in the Senate and being overseen by the Speaker of the House, Harry Reid, at the time, to invest something like $20 million in a program to look into the question of UFOs. This going back to the early 2000s. And the second article in the Times, one specifically about Navy footage of UFOs that have quickly become internationally known as Tic Tac. But it was very much a Navy story. And it was almost as if the official world of media and high visibility folks in the public were ready to take it seriously and say, yes, what is this? Is some secret project, or is this truly anomalous footage captured by the Navy? I think it was from a destroyer with the USS Princeton. Mac, your thoughts on this?
Well, there's no doubt that those videos are real. The Tic Tac videos were taken by Navy pilots in the middle of during training and weapons training and things like that. And that's kind of important because the new committee was actually established to make sure that UFOs do not hinder the security of our training ranges and our weapons ranges. Yeah, it's semantics, but that's really the thing that they said that they wanted to spend the money on. I think that the whole idea is that they started Project Blue Book, that ended in 1967, and they said, okay, that's the end of it. So they lied to us there because we know that it went at least to the 90s, and they admitted that they had this secret program, and then Harry Reid did get some money that went nowhere. And it looks like this new one, even though the Tic Tac videos are the ones that kind of spurred it, they are spending a lot of money. They're not releasing anything, and the whole idea of that was supposed to be transparency. And the Clubb and I were talking the other day, and it's like, where is the transparency? They keep kind of handing off the football to each other. But I just want to say this, just overall, because I know we're coming to the end. When you think about it, and once again, I don't want to be that guy, but when you think about it, all of the things when you have questions about, what does the U.S. military know? Do we have re-engineered stuff on our weapons? And, do we have the secret to anti-grav and so on and so forth? You have to remember that the things that the U.S. military does, not to defend them, but and NASA as well, they're technological advances that if people want to assign them to the aliens, that's actually denigrating, humans. These are things that humans have done. The space shuttle, for all it's worth, it was launching a dump truck into space, but there was 137 missions to the space shuttle. 27 of them were for the military, and they think about another 20 were also somehow involved with the military. The military would not launch the space shuttle into space if they had the secret to anti-grav. As far as Space Force is concerned, I agree. I agree with them all, is that there is a Space Force, and there are odd things up there that are flying around we might not know about, but it has nothing to do with flying to Pluto and Saturn and all this stuff, because once again, where's the logistics? What I'd like to do is have our friend Richard Dolan on. We could probably debate this, because I know he's a secret Space Force fan,
Juan, you served in the Navy. Your thoughts when you first were aware the story was breaking, and what you think of the whole thing at this point?
I'm sorry, I'm going to beg off on this question because it's just I think Mac has really nailed it down. I mean, he nailed it. I don't think I have much to add to what Mac said.
And Commander Cobra, your thoughts before we move to the next topic?
Very briefly, I had the great opportunity to talk with a number of the folks that were on the Princeton, interviewed them. Yes. There's no doubt that they recorded actual events. Where I probably have my biggest departure with Mac on this is that I'm convinced that this is terrestrially controlled technology. Its source, I couldn't tell you. I think it does have advanced propulsion. I think they did purposely run these kinds of quote unquote exercise type runs on there. And it is a perfect self-licking ice cream cone when you see all the other things that have been added in. Harry Reid, when he was leading the Senate, had a number of people, Mr. Bigelow being the primary aspect of it, that use this and has some very interesting space technology to bring this up. But I don't think the altruistic goals were to reveal anything or really bring out information. I think it was to move budgetary support into this area and move it forward. If anyone believes that we do not have actively running military operations or military assessment of anything and everything that flies anywhere near that we can see, they're deceiving themselves. We do this for other countries. We would do this for any other reason that it's out there. And I remain convinced that the Tic Tac, because of other things that were mixed in, and I got into it with a number of hosts that are here on the great KGRA radio station years back, trying to explain to them that some of those videos that were thrown in there were exercise videos that I was not part of, but I had seen in debriefs that were going on, showing other things mixed in there just to keep the hype going. A lot of this is deception, and the deception is to allow for not to reveal the true purpose and everything. As the line went in the right stuff, no Bucks, no Buck Rogers, and we're playing big money all the time trying to make these things fly and go forward. There's no doubt these events occurred in my mind when we talk about the Tic Tac. I just happen to have a fairly minority view of what it is and what we might be up against.
Well, it's a well-informed minority view, that's for sure. Willie, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Cobra as far as much of this is budget related. You know, they bring these things out to increase the budget. I certainly do believe there's activity out there. And as I mentioned previously, just go back to this May, the House Intelligence Committee, they had a intelligence officer on there who showed a video of the item that was taken, a picture that was taken from an F-18 fighter. So, you know, May is the latest that they've shown us something, not much, but then that disappoints me because I really think it's budget related. They must be, you know, coming in trying to get some more funds right now. So they give us little bits and pieces of things, particularly Congress, just to get some more funding.
Yeah, no question about it. As we come into our last 5 minutes or so, the question of truly anomalous UFOs that are advanced technology, because we all know that there's a great deal that we do not know, cannot know about the phenomena, and a percentage of it may be ethereal, interdimensional, what have you. I'm more concerned with, in our discussions, obviously, in talking about the corporeal, the metallic devices from parts unknown that come and go with impunity for their own reasons. Any thoughts as we close on them, Raven?
That's a tough one.
Basically, why they're here, why they come and go.
A lot of it, I think, is they're just kind of watching what we're doing, you know, just kind of keeping tabs. I don't know if it's necessarily they want to help or hurt us. I think it's really just, okay, like, I mean, this is going to sound really dumb, but the way that South Park did it years ago, where, you know, Earth was a reality show. I always come back to that. I'm like, what if that is?
I have no problem with that one.
Yeah, like you really think about it, you're like, it's not a far-fetched idea, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, I just don't know. I believe in other things being out there 100%. I just, you know, there's, again, I flip-flop with it because there's that, you know, well, what if it's this? What if it's this? And then my mind just goes crazy.
Amen. Commander Cobra, in closing, your thoughts on the true nature of What is unexplainable here? What is definitively off Earth? Not us.
Peter, two things. My first reaction is going to be there's no doubt that this is occurring, and it troubles me to a great extent that they have not revealed themselves. That is what keeps me up at night, so to speak, on this, because if you're able to do this, what deal have you conjured up with some of the best and brightest of the self-appointed elite of this planet to keep it from the rest of us? Why don't you just have the, as we talked about in Exeter, the day the earth stood still moment? Why have we not had that moment? What is going on? What is this grand theater behind it?
Thank you.
I really enjoyed being on your show, and I just want to give a quick shout out to the greatest audience on the planet, the old ways to sign off on KGRA. Thanks very much.
You're most welcome, and thank you for that thought. Willie, your thoughts as we move to the end of the show?
Well, when you look out at what's up there, I think, first of all, they don't have any interest in interacting with us, or they would have by now. I think everything they're doing is based on what is on their time frame and their timeline. And there's no doubt that, people are seeing things, but what's the percentage? I think only 5% of the UFOs, or whatever we call them, are unidentified, actually. But yeah, there's something there, and but it's really not interested in dealing with us. It's only on their terms, and for whatever reasons, we may never know.
Yeah. Quickly, Juan, your thoughts in closing?
I'm tired.
Amen.
It's a lot of heavy stuff. I think the panel here is great. I mean, you have a good cross section of people here.
Juan, what time is it where you are right now?
It's almost 2:00 in the morning.
That's
I'm
right.
up all day. It's 10 minutes to 2. That's fine. But Peter, you assemble a lot of good experts here, and sometimes I'm in the position of having to concur with these experts because I haven't done the study and the research like these guys have.
Yeah.
And the technology that these extraterrestrials bring to us just to show off is probably real, and we just don't want to admit it. And if we did admit it, if the government admitted it, we'd be all running and screaming for the hills saying, oh my God, we're defenseless. So that's why the government doesn't do it that way.
Yeah, thank you for that. And wishing you much success and happiness in your and your wife's new life in England.
Thank you, Peter.
And you can go to sleep very shortly.
Next time we come by, give me a ring and I'll take the train and go and see you.
Fair enough. Mack, thank you for bringing this great group together and continuing to do your work with them every week on the air. Your thoughts as we close?
Well, just that, we don't always agree on the show. We agree tonight, more or less, but we always have fun on the show. It's you can find us anywhere on Google. We're in 53 different countries, podcast and radio show. We're a very high energy show. People like us. And I'm glad that you gave us the opportunity to be interviewing, because usually we're interviewing people, and now to be interviewed by someone else is really different. So thank you, Peter. I really appreciate it. Mack Maloney's Military Exile Show. Just Google us, you'll find us.
Thank you, Mack, and thank you all for taking part in tonight's show. I really appreciate it. My guest next week, thank you, will be my dear friend Dan Madsen. Dan is somebody who is not involved in the UFO world per se, but as a boy saw a singular life-changing episode of Star Trek when it first started out, and then began to work for and with Gene Roddenberry and the Star Trek cast and production people, appearing in films, running their fan shows, their fanzines, then saw a film when he was a little older called, what was it called? Star Wars. That's right. And became involved with George Lucas and his people, and has lived one of the most remarkable lives of anybody that I know. If you've enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to it. Tell your friends. See you next week. Same time, same station. And stand up for what you believe in, stay safe, and be kind to each other. See you next week.